if you've always felt like you're the only one you can rely on and you're the only parent in the room kind of thing, you're the one that always shows up and is responsible. The problem is oftentimes unconsciously, we don't realize that we have been doing all the things, but we haven't really been doing them for us. And like imagine we've been everybody else's parent, we've been taking care of everybody else, but we have never done the work to actually reclaim our own inner child and then do this work for ourselves. So we have to circle back and become the responsible, loving, compassionate, caring adult and parent to our inner child. And my name is Deb Blum, and this is the Whole Soul Way. It's my signature program that I've been teaching for the past 4 years. And I decided to offer the foundation lessons, exercises, and tools for free on YouTube and all of the major podcast channels. Because I truly believe that the world needs more of us healed, whole, authentic, and awake. And you know what? I don't want to be a barrier to anyone getting the help that they need. And in fact, I really want to be part of the change. Each lesson builds on the last. So if this is your first time here, make sure that you start at the beginning. This is your invitation. Show up, do the work, and join the movement of souls who are committed to creating a better world, one inner transformation at a time. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. I am so glad you're here. This is our first official step along the journey. Some might call it a module. And I'm excited that you're here. So I first want to just acknowledge what a big commitment that you've made to yourself. This module is about befriending the ego. I'm going to give you some definitions in a few moments, but what I want to say first is that I really believe that this is something that differentiates and really sets you up for success when you compare it to other programs. A lot of programs around self-love, building a relationship with yourself, and inner child healing work can trigger a response from your ego that's filled with resistance and a big pushback. So we start this module from the place of you befriending your ego. And what that means is that we get to know your ego, why she's here, what the point is of your ego's existence, the ways that she's come in and supported you and helped you. We're going to take time to actually appreciate her, help her to calm down, because one of the things is that her job is to protect you. I use the two terms interchangeably, the inner protector and the ego. They're the same thing in this program. And the inner protector comes in and she's there protecting you. Your ego has been doing this for your lifetime to keep you safe and for your survival. So we have to help her to know that we're not here telling her she's going to go away. We're telling her that we want to work as a team and we want to change the way we do things so that she doesn't come up and start to resist. Because remember, she's a protector. So she's like, I'm a warrior. So in this process, it's actually a really helpful step along the journey. Let's talk about our learning goals for today. We are going to always have definitions in every lesson. And this one here is going to be the definition of the ego and the soul. We're going to also understand a little bit better of where we are right now, transitioning from more of an ego way of living to the whole soul way of living. Most of us, we're just doing exactly what humans do. We live the first half of our life more from our ego, and then we shift in our second half of our life from living from more of our soul. And remember, for most of us, if you look at the average life expectancy, your midlife is maybe somewhere around like 37 and a half years old. So it happens young. And for many other people, I've had people in this program that range from their late 20s up until their late 60s. So it's never too early and never too late. And then we talk about the gap in between. And then we're going to talk about how it relates to the brain. I like to try to bring everything back to the brain because I really think that even though I might take some creative liberties around it, it does help to ground it in our human reality. The first definition that we're going to go into is the ego. And I want to just say something really clear up front. So the last cohort, there was a therapist in the group. And in the beginning, she had a little bit of a reaction to the use of the word ego, because from a psychotherapist perspective, it's not exactly how a psychotherapist would define the ego. I am using a little bit more of a spiritual definition of ego, the ego mind. And we're also talking about the ego defense mechanism. And I'm lumping them all together and calling them the inner protector. You'll hear me call also the trickster ego, because To me, this is just a good place for you to understand the concept of ego consciousness. Okay. If you look at the definition of ego, there are multiple definitions, but I took this one, which is the self, especially as distinct from the world and other selves. And so the ego is actually what makes us an individual versus the soul being interconnected. The ego is actually meant to have separation consciousness. That's the idea. The ego is the part of you that's always trying to make sense of things, to try to keep you feeling safe, to be keeping you contained. It likes predictability and status quo, not so excited when you're making changes. The ego also likes simplistic solutions and formulas to just know this is what it is, and kind of black and white thinking. It usually goes into its memory bank and it finds things that feel similar. And it's like, this is what the situation is. And that's why the ego defense mechanism can be so reactive, because it's looking for similar things where it might have been dangerous and just comes right in and tries to take care of protecting us. The ego absolutely plays a crucial role in how we interact and relate to the outside world. So we're not trying to get rid of the ego. The ego is important. If you didn't have the ego, you wouldn't really be doing very much. A healthy ego structure is really important and foundational to self-actualizing. So if you want to evolve and grow, having a healthy ego structure is critical. The ego defense mechanism is our fear response system. It's why we exist, right? Because our ancestors have had this well-honed ego defense mechanism and kept them alive so that then they could keep having children and then continue the lineage to get to you. So because it's so focused on safety and survival, it's like one of those things like survival is great. But if you've gotten your basic needs met, Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about that we have basic needs that need to be met, like your need for food and your need for housing and things like that. And as you move up that hierarchy, you get to things like self-esteem and connection. And I don't remember what they are exactly, but the top one being self-actualization. And you must have survived to get there. So we're not dissing survival here. We're just saying survival isn't enough for you. But the ego is focused on keeping you safe, avoiding pain and discomfort, and basically it's all about survival. So the goal of the ego is self-preservation, survival, safety, security, acceptance, approval. It's also success, striving, all of the outward manifestation of being a human being. That's really what it is. The ego is limited. The soul is limitless. Let's just talk about the definition that I got from one of the dictionaries. It's the part of the human that's regarded as immaterial, immortal, separable from the body at death, capable of moral judgment, and susceptible to happiness or misery in a future state. Don't know exactly what that is, but the part of a human when disembodied from death. So you could say your soul lives on. Right? Some people really differentiate between spirit and soul, and I'm not really in the business of doing that. I'm really just saying to you, the part of you that lives on beyond your body, and it's interconnected to all that is. So it's the spirit and essence of a person that lives on after death. Some say our human body is the container and allows the soul to grow and evolve. So we have to have the ego keeping the human body alive in order for the soul to be able to be present, to experience what it needs to experience, and to grow and to evolve and expand. It's been said that the soul is the driver in the body. I think for most of us, we would probably say that the ego is the driver these days. I think so, because for the most part, if we aren't intentional about it, the ego will naturally step in and drive our car, so to speak. Soul is like the vital core. It's central and integral, and it's the mysterious and mystical nature of our lives. It's there whether you think it is or not. It's there whether you acknowledge it or not. It's there. The soul shows up individually in this body, in this human experience, but it is what's interconnected. It's what is part of oneness. It's unity consciousness versus ego being separation consciousness. It's not that one is better than the other. I mean, if you are incarnated and embodied in a human body, you want to have an ego. So we're not here trying to say death to the ego. I get the intention behind it. First of all, I don't think it's helpful because I think our ego rebels. But second of all, I just don't think that it's necessary unless you want to be just like a soul floating around without enjoying and being in the world, and you want to be somehow like transcending being a human. But I'm going to guess you probably would like to still be a human being, still hang out with your family and do the things you want to do in the world, maybe make an impact in the world in some way, but you want to also be following your soul's guidance instead of your ego's limited perspective. If you believe in reincarnation, which I will just say that I do, so you will hear me talking about this. And if you don't, you can just listen and we can agree to, I don't know if I would say disagree, but you do not have to believe my beliefs. And I don't actually know for sure. I just know it in my quote unquote soul. So if you believe in reincarnation, the soul would persist throughout your many lifetimes. Now, the goal of the soul is evolution, expansion, connection, love, and bringing you closer to yourself and your truth. The soul really ultimately wants to be fully expressed as you. That's why you came here. There is no mistake. Some people will say that they're not good enough, but from a soul perspective, like the soul came here in this body exactly as this body is meant to be, you're perfect. So you may not feel that way, but from your soul's perspective, you're perfect. Why don't we have what we want in our lives? I mean, pretty much everybody that's attracted to my work is responsible, gets things done, is usually the reliable one, probably oftentimes an overfunctioner doing more than what other people are doing. And we know what we want, and we even probably know the steps to get there. And you probably have always been good at getting whatever it is that you want in your life, but you're like, why can't I get this done? Well, first of all, the biggest reason is because we just don't know. We don't teach it. Nobody really understands it. Nobody's really talking about it in any type of, I would say, kind of mainstream way. So the problem is that our lives have been built on fragmentation rather than wholeness. In other words, it's built on this idea that you're only allowed to be parts that the world considers and culture considers and your family of origin that considers acceptable. So that means that you're not whole. You're just part of you. The other thing is that as children, we did not get what we needed. So we're always seeking to get our needs met from other people. So it's kind of a funny thing because most of the people that are drawn to the whole soul way are women who have always been the ones that get it all done and everybody relies on. They basically feel like they can't really rely on other people. And I always say to them, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but you're going to have to just channel your awesome self-reliance and your independence and your ability to get things done one more time because we have to circle back. It's like, if you've always felt like you're the only one you can rely on and you're the only parent in the room kind of thing, you're the one that always shows up and is responsible and all that. The problem is oftentimes unconsciously, we don't realize that we have been doing all the things, but we haven't really been doing them for us. And like, imagine we've been everybody else's parent. We've been taking care of everybody else, but we have never done the work to actually reclaim our own inner child and then do this work for ourselves. So we have to circle back and become the responsible, loving, compassionate, caring adult and parent to our inner child. And that's one of the things that we're doing here. So we start to recollect ourselves, meaning we go in there and we start to find all the parts of ourselves that we've cut off from, the feelings, the experiences, the traumas, the messages, the beliefs, everything that is from our past, whether we are aware of it consciously or not, we're going to go and look at those things. And as we reclaim all these parts, what happens is we shift away from this fragmentation to a more whole place because we claim those parts. And we're going to learn more about that in the next step about our wholes and coming into wholeness. But what happens is we start to become more fortified. We feel like we're safer internally. So we can then come out into the world at that point from a place of more wholeness, authenticity, and inner strength and safety. And then I say we'll be limitless because we're letting the soul take its rightful place as our guide rather than our ego as our guide. All right. So let's talk about the 3 specific ways that women suffer. Now, there will be times when men join this program. And I don't actually think this is exclusive to women. However, women tend to report this to me pretty regularly. And even if they don't use these words, I believe that women suffer because from a very young age, we have been proving our worth. We have been looking externally for validation and approval, and we're doing and performing and achieving. We do not believe we are worthy as we are. We believe that we need to prove our value by being productive and doing all the things. Because our life was hard, or all life is hard. Life is actually pretty hard, and life can be really traumatic and painful. Even if you haven't experienced what you might call trauma, I assure you, you have had traumatic experiences just by people dropping the ball, missing the mark, not being able to be there for you the way that you needed them to be as a child. So, what happens is we end up cutting off from our heart. So, we put on masks and we armor up our heart, and we basically are in our heads, and we cut off from our neck down to survive. And then we get into kind of managing, controlling, and thinking our way through life. And then we also are abandoning ourselves while we do that. So we're looking to go from being abandoned to being nurtured. So we look externally to get our needs met. And then we also are cut off from ourselves. So we don't trust ourselves. So we basically are just not present with ourselves. We abandon ourselves to prove our worth, and we abandon ourselves to feel safe in the world by staying in our heads. We think we need to do it all and that we're valued and loved for what we do, not who we are. And I would say two of the most important things that I want for you guys to get from this is to really do the journey from your head to your heart. It's actually probably the hardest journey you'll ever take. You'll hear people say that, but it's also the most rewarding one. And also, I want you to walk away realizing that you are loved for who you are, not what you do. And yes. So those are some important things for you to know about where you might be now. And I hope that we will find that we'll be in a different place at the end of this program. If there was one thing I could tell you that I think that this program is particularly amazing at, it is helping us to shift from that external orientation to maybe not immediately, but to at some point in the short term, after you have some type of disturbance, that you realize that where you might have in the past been like, oh, I need to call and fix and deal and manage, that you start to realize that the fastest path to feeling better is coming inward. Hey there, Deb here. Just one quick interruption. If you've been diving into the Whole Soul Way round one, the foundation and core lessons, and you're finding that it's really resonating with you, that is amazing. Now, some of you will get so much out of this free content, and that will be enough. But if you ever feel called to take it deeper, or you think you'd like a little bit more support, just know that there is a whole journey waiting for you inside our full program. Joining the full Whole Soul Way container means that you'll be part of a community. Not just any community, a community of people who are incredibly committed to their journey, who are engaged, empathetic, and so inspiring. And this community and my leadership means that you get more support and contextualization to your own life. Also, you'll have access to rounds 2 and 3 and future rounds that I create, where we take what you've learned in the foundations and then practice applying it to the nuance of our lives. We experience deeper embodiment of the healing, and it really allows us to step more fully into this way of living. This is really where the deeper transformation unfolds, when you have the support you need, community, in a container that's really sacred and safe. So if this is speaking to you, I definitely would say check out the full program and see if and how we could support your growth on an even deeper level. You can check it out at thewholesoulway.com/program. Okay, let's get back to it. So let's talk about how and why we abandon ourselves. Okay. So what happens as children, and you'll hear me repeat this multiple times over this course because it's really important for us to understand that we do this and why we do it and how it manifests. But our survival as children depends on our parents or our caregivers' acceptance and protection. So if we notice the things that are not acceptable to them, what we will do is stop doing those things. We will do the things that are acceptable. And then we're going to disown, abandon, and reject the things and the parts of us that would result in them rejecting us. So we don't want to lose the love and approval of our parents. That basically feels like death to us. So we would rather abandon ourselves because choosing authenticity risks that they would abandon us. I'm a student of Dr. Gabor Mate, and I took his compassion inquiry class. And one of the things that he taught us was that two of the primary needs are acceptance and authenticity. But most children have to let go of authenticity in order to be accepted. So what we're doing is we're reclaiming our authenticity. And who do we need to accept us? Us. We need to accept ourselves. So we actually have it all within our power to both give ourselves acceptance and to give ourselves authenticity. But when you were a child, you did not have that power. So it was wise and very resourceful for you as a child to do this. So what happens is, because we're little, we don't have power. We don't have the ability to survive without our parents. And so our ego comes in and it's like, we are going to make sure you survive. So she hyper focuses on what's going to keep you safe, loved, accepted, validated, and approved of, all the way into adulthood and through adulthood to now. So even if you've done a lot of inner work, this is an ongoing journey to deal with how our ego will come in and protect us and put masks on, and we'll abandon ourselves. It's like, you may get better. I would say I am so much more aware now, but I'm still catching new places where I'm not showing up the way that I want to. I'm not being as authentic. My ego is coming in and protecting me. So it's a journey, it's a practice. So what happens is, by doing this and our ego coming in and being in charge, we become disconnected from the truth of who we are. As I've said, like, authenticity for most of us was really not what our parents wanted. They really wanted us to fit in and be acceptable. And part of that was because they wanted us to be good, functioning members of society. And our society has some conditioning and expectations for how we should act in the world. So we continue to act as we should, and we do whatever it takes to get by. And that means that abandoning ourselves is on the table. Oftentimes that's what happens. So we eventually notice, though, that we're getting disconnected from who we are. We feel this lack of internal safety. We feel burdened by life and what it takes to feel safe. We feel a sense of restlessness, a sense of something's missing. We feel unfulfilled, dissatisfied. We feel like we should be happier, but we're not. We can't understand. We have everything that we always wanted. Why am I not happy? All those things are real pointers to the ways that we've abandoned ourselves and that we're cut off from ourselves, and especially cut off from our authentic truth. Okay, so next up is a conversation about moving from the ego way of living to our soul way of living. Carl Jung, you'll hear me refer to him here. He is a Swiss psychiatrist, and he is the person who coined the term shadow work. And I love Carl Jung's way of looking at the world because he's very much about integration, expanded consciousness, and wholeness. And so he says that the first half of our life is devoted to forming a healthy ego, and the second half is to going inward and letting go of it, letting go of the ego. Now, there is another lesson that's going to be in here, and it's going to be a little bit more detail around this. But I want you to just understand that the first half of life is usually ego-led and external. It's when we're answering the question, what does the world want from me? You could probably relate to that, right? If you went to high school and then you went to college and got a job and then you had children, it's like, what are you supposed to do, right? It's following your roles. It's usually showing the world only the parts of ourselves that we think are acceptable. Our priorities are safety, security, striving, success, status, money, building a family, things like that. Nothing wrong with that, okay? But if you keep staying on that path, what will happen is your life will start to shrink, because the ego will keep wanting more and more and more and more safety, and you will start to shrink your life. If you are lucky, which I consider all of you to be lucky, you will be doing work to live from your soul. And that is in your second half of your life. And whenever you get the inspiration, and the second half of your life is when you're answering the question, what does my soul want from me? Usually there's a pull toward wholeness. Your priorities are a little bit more around relationships, authenticity, your impact in the world, meaning, love, purpose. And this is when our life becomes limitless and expansive. So how do we get from ego-led to soul-led? Well, first of all, you're here. You're doing it right now. This is what you're doing. Now, what I'm teaching you here is not a one and done. You're not going to be at the end of this program and be like, oh my God, I'm all done. I just figured it out. Like, you are literally learning a new way of doing life. So if you felt like you're kind of in the rut, that would be like the rut of the ego. I would like to move you to the groove of the soul. You're learning another way of doing life. So it's not a one and done. Okay. And that's okay though. I remember in almost every time I've taught this, at least a couple of people will say, oh, I just realized that this is a process. This isn't just like skills and tools, though it is lots of skills and tools also. Okay. So how to get from here to there. Well, the first thing we have to do is do this work to continually unhook from fear and programming from our childhood and conditioning from society and pressure and all the other ego constructs. Okay, so that's one of the most important things we can be doing is knowing how to notice when something happens that triggers us and then how to use it to transmute it into something that is useful for us. We have to also build the cognitive strength to resist the brain and the ego's powerful pull towards safety, security, and acceptance. So we have to be able to notice it and be able to have enough strength to resist it. We have to cultivate enough inner safety through self-connection and reparenting. And we have to heal our past traumas. That is an ongoing journey as well. And as we do that, we integrate all of our fragmented selves into wholeness and unconditional self-love. We ultimately are going to continue to work toward bravely living from our soul's truth and showing up more fully in the world. So that is the journey. Okay, so the transition from the ego way to the whole soul way is when we live where the soul is the driver. You'll hear me talk about a couple of different ways we can look at this, but one of the ways is we look at the ego getting into the back seat and the soul gets into the driver's seat of our life. So we can be grateful for the ego, and that's what we're going to be doing along this journey. This is what's kind of interesting. So the ego is the protector of all of the parts of us that have been abandoned in the name of acceptance and safety and survival. Okay. Picture the ego is like standing like a warrior. Behind the ego is all of the things that she's like, you cannot go there. No, those were painful. Those were difficult things. No, those things made me get in trouble. No, those things made mommy and daddy not like me. So all those things we said, no, we don't want to look at those. The ego knows where they all are. And life literally shows us how to find all of those parts and reclaim them. And I'm going to teach you how. So you don't need to know right now. All you need to know is that's part of the big overarching journey that we're on. In order for you to even be in this program, it means you must have enough safety in your life that you are able to feel free to do healing work. What happens is we feel safe enough along this journey to choose who we want to be and to be who we're meant to be. So we don't have to please other people. We might think we have to because we are running on old tapes and belief systems, but our actual life is not at risk if we don't please another person, if we don't do everything we've been doing to maybe make other people comfortable. We are more free to be our true selves. When we live from the ego, it feels like life is always happening to us. Like, I can't believe that this happened to me again. I can't believe it. When we live from our soul, we recognize that life is actually happening for us. Life is showing us all of the parts that we've cut off from. Life is showing us all the ways that our ego is in charge and helping us to put the soul into the driver's seat. So let's talk about how this relates to the brain. This is a very rough idea of your brain, and it really is just talking about the two major areas right here. And I want you to think about this like this, okay? Even though the amygdala is not the ego, it is a really, really important piece of the process of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, any of your fear responses, okay? So I'm going to just take creative liberties here, and I'm going to say that the amygdala is basically where your inner protector, your ego, your trauma, it's all that stuff. Okay. And it's the most primitive part of your brain. It's the reptilian part of your brain, and it's part of the limbic system. It's really the home of the fight, flight, fawn, freeze, flock, and other fear responses. Now, it's way more complicated than that because there's actual ways that it integrates with the hypothalamus, and there's a lot more going on. But an oversimplification is just say the amygdala. Okay. And the amygdala is an amplifier of our emotions, and it's actually all about innate behaviors and self-preservation, which is survival, right? When you get triggered, it's your amygdala that's getting activated. And then we have the prefrontal cortex, okay? I know that this is not what it is, but I like to think of it as your inner adult or your soul. So several of my clients have ADHD, and they talk to me about what they're learning in other therapies and stuff and how they're being trained to inhabit their prefrontal cortex more. I really believe as a society, as a species, what we're being called to do is we've been living a lot from our amygdala, the most primitive part of our brain, the reptilian brain. We have access to this very evolved part of our brain, which no other animals have the way that we have, this prefrontal cortex. It's the last part of the brain to develop, and it's also the most evolved part, but it's also the newest part in our evolution. So we are being called to stretch into our prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where you step in as your inner adult. Okay. You're like, I'm the one in charge. I know it's not your soul, but if you think about the concept of a third eye, right? Your third eye would be like right here, which would be where you tap into higher consciousness and you see more. That's all in the prefrontal cortex area. So it's not that far-fetched to say that, but it's basically the part of you that does help you make decisions and to problem solve and to analyze and interpret your situations. Now, the way that this works, interestingly, is that the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex do have a straight line connection from the blue into the orange. There is a link down here, and I'll include it in the description, but our childhood experiences impact this connection. They've shown that people who had very stressful childhoods, that the connection between their amygdala and their prefrontal cortex is delayed. The amygdala checks in and it looks for memories that support it, and that's how it determines that it's dangerous. But it's really supposed to have a quicker connection to your prefrontal cortex to say, hello, prefrontal cortex, is this actually a dangerous situation? And the prefrontal cortex is supposed to be able to say, no, 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 this isn't really that dangerous. That email's not actually going to kill you. But because we haven't been doing this work and really understanding how it all works, so many of us are feeling like our amygdala is running the show and our ego is just jumping in. Okay. So we're going to learn how to do something different here. That's the goal. We want to train our prefrontal cortex to get in the driver's seat and tame the amygdala by showing that the prefrontal cortex is trustworthy. I know this seems like a stretch, and what we're going to do is give you different language because we're going to start to associate this with inner protector, inner child, and an inner adult and soul. We're going to have all of these parts that we're going to start to honor and acknowledge. But it's really important that we build this trust, because right now, see, the thing about the ego and the amygdala, right now, they think they're the ones in charge. They're the ones that are keeping us safe. They're like, no one else is actually making any concerted effort to make sure that we're okay here. So we're going to prove to our amygdala and our ego that we really can take charge and be leaders of our lives. We're going to invite the ego to get into the back seat. And I like to say this, the amygdala and the ego, they have a say, but they don't get their way unless it's really, truly a survival situation, like you're in a back alley and someone's chasing you, and then you want your amygdala and your fear response to jump right in. But otherwise, no. We need to be able to find a way to tame that more reactive part of our brain. In the workbook, there is a self-reflection worksheet, and there's also a digital worksheet. And these are some of the questions that you might want to ask yourself, because right now we're really trying to set the stage for you having a bigger reason why you're doing this, because it's important when you feel any form of distraction or resistance that you remember that you have a reason why you're doing this work. And I would invite you to not skip this exercise. In fact, I'd invite you to do the very best you can to not skip any exercises. One of the things that I have learned is often if we skip an exercise, it's almost always our trickster ego or our inner protector that's telling us we don't need to do that. And then we miss out because our ego is then just continuing to run the show. So it's almost like you just trust the system that I've got here. I never want people to disregard what's true for them, but oftentimes we don't know what's true for us, and we think what's true for us is really our ego coming in, trying to keep our lives small and not let us make change. So what have we covered today? Well, we covered the definitions, understanding where we are right now, how we're trying to transition to the whole soul way, and how it relates to our brain. Once we're done with this, then you're going to go into some of the more experiential exercises. I put some times in here. These are just estimates, but there's a meditation called the Whole Soul Meditation, box breathing exercise, which is just a teaching of it, but you can use it anytime you want. We're then going to go into exploring your ego defense mechanism. So you're going to start to pay attention to where is your ego showing up. And if you've done a lot of work on yourself and you think you know this, I invite you to do it again, because we always find new things, because as we evolve and expand, I call it the spiral of healing, but you are continually meeting things at a new level of consciousness. So no matter what you've done before, I promise you, you will see something different this time because that's just how it works. We also have an exercise in there about naming your ego and your inner child. I will give you a little introduction to your inner child. I want you to think about this program. It's scaffolded in the sense that you're going to learn bits of pieces before you're even ready for them. The inner child reparenting lesson isn't even for a while, but we can't do this without talking about your inner child because, well, let's just be honest. Your inner protector is also almost always a child. And so the work that we're doing in this section here is really about inner child work. You are learning how to turn inward to talk to your inner child protector parts. So you have inner child protector parts, and that's your ego defense mechanism. And you have inner child other parts, and those could be wounded parts and they can be essence parts, but your inner child. And so we'll talk more about that in that lesson. And then you're going to go through an exercise of having gratitude for your ego. People don't do this. They talk about it like the ego is like pariah, but the ego has been really your best ally, truly your best ally for your whole life so far. You are where you are right now because of your ego. And while you may not be satisfied with where you are right now, or you might be, your ego has kept you alive. And then there is a meditation, which is called Calm Your Ego Guided Meditation. It's more like a talk / meditation, but it's definitely worth listening to. And I promise you that if you invite your ego to listen to it, she will feel calmer. And then a little yoga pose mantra thing to embody this a little bit more. So these exercises, please do not skip them. I promise you, it is necessary. They actually are really important and they're in a very specific order on purpose. But the next step is meeting our wounded parts and how we protect ourselves. And that will be in step 2. Okay, one last thing is I want you to just think about this lesson. And in the comments, I want you to post one thing that you take away from this lesson. It's really important. One of the things that we know about our brain is that if we claim something that we remember, we will remember it better. And then if we read other people's things that they claim to remember, it's just a funny thing, but because we are social creatures, we tend to remember it better. Maybe there's something that you want to say that you learned that you hadn't known before, or something that felt really resonant, something that you knew, but it reminded you of it. And now you're happy to be reminded. Maybe it's something that you're just wanting to explore more your own way that you define ego or soul or something like that. Please do post in the comments.